What happens when wealth isn't just lost, but simply ceases to exist? We spend our lives believing gold is eternal, an indestructible symbol of power and permanence. But history hides a dark secret. Billions in untold treasures that never changed hands. They just evaporated. I'm not talking about cinematic heists or the looted vaults we hear about on the news. I'm talking about entire empires reduced to nothing, where valuable relics were consumed by fire, crushed by the pressure of the ocean, or dissolved by relentless time. While the world chases the shine, I invite you to gaze into the ashes. If you have the curiosity to unravel the mysteries the past tried to bury, you're in the right place. Subscribe and hit the like button to support our quests. Your presence keeps this channel alive. What we are about to investigate isn't in museums and can never be recovered. These are the fortunes that literally turned to dust, and the first of them vanished in a single night of flames. Case 1. The Temple Gold Treasure Lost Forever. To understand the magnitude of what was lost, we must first transport our minds to a time when wealth wasn't digital, didn't exist as numbers on a screen, but was palpable, heavy, and above all, sacred. We are speaking of Jerusalem, in the year 70 of the Common Era. The Second Temple was not merely a religious structure. It was the economic and spiritual epicenter of an entire nation, a monument built to mirror divine glory on earth. Historical accounts, such as those of Flavius Josephus, describe an opulence that defies our modern understanding. It wasn't just coins kept in chests. The exterior walls were plated with gold sheets, so massive that when the sun rose over Mount Moriah, the reflection was blinding, forcing observers to look away as if they were staring at the sun itself. Inside, the wealth was even more staggering. Colossal candelabras, tables for offerings, and the famous sculpted golden vine, with clusters as tall as a man. All of this represented centuries of donations, tributes, and a collective mindset of accumulation for the divine. But history teaches us that the greatest fortresses guard the seeds of their own destruction. The Roman siege, led by the future Emperor Titus, was not just a military battle. It was a brutal clash between two worldviews, and here we enter the backstage of one of humanity's most chaotic nights. The decisions made in that heat of the moment, both by the Jewish defenders and the Roman legions, sealed the fate of that fortune. Titus, according to some sources, wished to spare the temple to turn it into a trophy of conquest. But war has a will of its own. When a torch was thrown by an anonymous soldier through a gilded window, the destiny of that untold wealth changed forever. The fire, fed by ancient cedar wood, fine fabrics, and sacred oils, reached infernal temperatures. It is at this point that the true transformation occurs, a physical and tragic phenomenon we rarely stop to analyze. Gold, the metal we associate with eternity, has a melting point. Faced with that extreme heat, the massive wall plating, the sacred utensils, and the hoarded treasures were not stolen in the traditional sense. They began to weep. The solid metal liquefied, running like rivers of golden lava down the marble staircases, seeping into the cracks of the pavement, mixing with the soot, the charred wood, and the bodies of the fallen. What was once distinct, defined, and valuable artwork became a shapeless amalgam. The impact of this scene must have been terrifying, the very structure of the divine melting before the eyes of the faithful. When the flames finally subsided, days later, the setting was not that of a cracked safe, but a lunar landscape of destruction. The hidden truth about the looting of the temple is that it required a mining operation, not just a loading job. The gold had penetrated so deep into the stone foundations due to the heat that, to recover, Roman soldiers literally had to overturn every rock, inadvertently fulfilling the prophecy that not one stone would be left upon another. They had to break the floor, grind the rubble, and sift through the ashes. However, not everything was recovered. Modern experts and archaeologists speculate that tons of this gold, now fused with earth and rock, simply fragmented into microscopic particles during the cooling and demolition process. This wealth didn't simply change owners. It changed states. It integrated into the soil of Jerusalem. Part of it turned to dust, swept away by desert winds, scattering atoms of sacred gold across the entire region. Imagine the brutal irony. The greatest treasure of the ancient world, reduced to glittering dust, mixed with common sand, trampled on for centuries without anyone realizing the value beneath their boots. This journey from the material to the immaterial forces us to question the solidity of everything we build. That gold, which motivated wars, which symbolized absolute power, proved to be as fragile as the wood that supported it. The revelations that arise when studying this event go beyond archaeology. They touch the essence of a human effort to create something eternal, something that defies time, was undone in a single night of fury. That which was solid, immutable, and guarded under the highest security evaporated. There was no insurance to cover it, no bank to return it. It was a total, absolute, and irreversible loss. The temple gold became a legend, not because it is hidden in a cave waiting to be found, but because it ceased to exist as we know it. It returned to nature, fused to the elements, reminding us that possession is a temporary illusion. As we look at the metaphorical ashes of this event, we realize that the value we attribute to things is, ultimately, a social convention that fire does not respect. The fire of 70 AD didn't just burn a building, it burned the idea of material security. And that is a harsh lesson. Often in our own lives, we build our personal temples. We accumulate our securities believing we are protected without realizing that a sudden change in temperature and unexpected crisis can melt the foundations of what we thought was unshaken. The dust of that temple still drifts through history, a silent reminder that empires fall and fortunes vanish. But the mystery does not end on solid ground. There are riches that were not consumed by fire, but rather swallowed by the cold, crushing silence of the depths. Where the pressure is so great, it crushes even the hope of rescue. If the story of the temple teaches us about fire, the next chapter will teach us about ice and absolute darkness. 2. Mark this moment of reflection on the fragility of the material world. Before we descend into the deep waters, I ask you to leave just one word in the comments. Ashes. Let this serve as our code, a silent acknowledgement that we understand that everything, in the end, can transform. Case to the Titanic treasure wealth at the bottom of time. As the ashes of Jerusalem cooled beneath the desert wind, history marched on, and with it, the human arrogance of believing we could conquer not just the land, but the oceans. We leave the fire behind, and now dive into a different element, where destruction isn't explosive and immediate, but slow, silent, and crushing. When we speak of lost fortunes, our minds tend to wander to pirate chests on tropical islands. But the greatest concentration of lost wealth of the 20th century isn't buried in sand. It rests in perpetual darkness, 3,800 meters deep in the North Atlantic. The Titanic was not merely a ship. It was a microcosm of Edwardian society, a floating time capsule carrying the GDP of small nations in its vaults and luxury cabins. The mindset of the era was one of invincibility. Men like John Jacob Astor, IV at the time the richest man in the world, and Benjamin Guggenheim boarded with the absolute certainty that their fortunes, lives, and belongings were protected by the marvel of modern engineering. But the decisions made on that fateful night in 1912 show us that nature does not negotiate with capital. When the iceberg tore through the hull, a brutal process of separation between man and his wealth began. What descended to the bottom wasn't just human lives, but a collection of artifacts that defined the pinnacle of luxury. And this is where reality differs from Hollywood fiction. In the movies, we see the ship resting majestically on the bottom, almost intact. In the hidden truth behind the scenes of oceanography, what happens down there is a slow, relentless digestion. Salt water, combined with a pressure of nearly 400 atmospheres, creates a hostile environment that acts like a temporal acid. Imagine the ship's interior as it descended. Strong boxes, family heirlooms, bare bonds, and hard cash. A lot of cash. There were millions in gold coins and banknotes, locked in the purser's safes. But the ocean has a chemistry of its own. Paper, railway shares, love letters, and property deeds all underwent an immediate transformation. The cellulose, attacked by bacteria and pressure, disintegrated into an unrecognizable pulp in a matter of weeks or months. That paper fortune, which represented the power of industrial empires on the surface, literally became Saramantan organic paste, consumed by microscopic organisms that make no distinction between insurance policy and a piece of common driftwood. One of the most painful examples of this loss is the Great Omar, an incredibly rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This was no ordinary book. It was a work of art bound in Moroccan leather, decorated with over 1,000 precious stones, rubies, emeralds, and gold. It had been auctioned shortly before the voyage and was being transported to New York. Today, it resides somewhere in the wreckage, but not as we knew it. The leather has rotted, the paper dissolved, and the structure holding the jewels has likely corroded or come apart. The precious stones, now loose, have fallen into the mud of the ocean floor, covered by decades of debris and marine snow, organic particles falling from the surface. One of the world's greatest masterpieces of bookbinding no longer exists. It has literally turned to seabed dust, scattered in the darkness where no light will ever touch. This journey of decomposition reveals the impact of time on matter. The ship itself is disappearing. Extremophile bacteria, like Halomonas, are devouring the iron of the hull, transforming tons of steel into rusticles that crumble at the slightest touch. Experts estimate that within a few decades, the Titanic will be nothing but an oxide stain on the ocean floor. If steel itself, forged to be indestructible, is turning to dust, what of the more delicate objects? The silk garments, the oil paintings, adorning the first-class lounges, the Persian rugs, all of it has been metabolized by the ocean. There is a deep melancholy in thinking about the safes that are still locked down there. Expeditions have tried to recover items, and succeeded with some, but the vast majority of the wealth has fused with the environment. Silver has oxidized until it is black and brittle. Tin has disintegrated due to low temperatures, a chemical phenomenon known as tin pest, where the metal literally crumbles into gray powder. Complex jewelry, mounted with sensitive alloys, has dismantled itself. What remains is not the treasure, but its primary components, returned to the periodic table in a disorganized manner. The revelations brought by the expeditions of James Cameron and Robert Ballard show us solitary shoes on the seafloor, arranged side by side. This is what remains of the victims. The bodies vanished. The bones dissolved due to the deep water chemistry, and the tanned leather of the shoes was the only thing the bacteria rejected. In the same way, the Titanic's fortune left its shoes. Inert gold and cold diamonds survived, but the context, the art, the ownership, and the identity of that wealth were erased. Where there was once a necklace, telling a family's history, today there is only crystallized carbon buried in the sludge. This perspective forces us to reevaluate what losing means. It isn't just not knowing where something is. It is knowing exactly where it is, but understanding that it no longer exists in the form that held value. The Titanic is a bank that never closes, but from which one can never withdraw. The wealth down there has become part of the planet's geology. It no longer belongs to the Guggenheims or the Astors. It belongs to the abyss. And the abyss does not guard treasures, it recycles matter. Everything taken by that tragedy underwent an irreversible transformation, from object of desire to particle of sediment. As we contemplate the shipwreck, we are confronted with the truth that nature always wins. The sea took back what was extracted from the earth. Luxury, comfort, and exclusivity were crushed by the indifferent pressure of the water. And just as fire purified the temple by turning gold into rock, water purified the Titanic by turning opulence into sludge. It is a silent and icy reminder that our grandest constructions are merely temporary loans from the elements, to anchor this feeling of depth and loss before we move to the next level of destruction. I want you to leave a word in the comments that summarizes the sensation of something that is there, but forever unreachable. Write only a B. Let that word be our watermark on this part of the history. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, but in a different way. If fire melts and water dissolves, what happens when destruction strikes something not made of gold or silver, but of ideas? Let us leave the seafloor and walk to the coast of Egypt, where humanity's greatest wealth was not measured in carats, but in words. And when that wealth burned, humanity lost something that could never be mined again. Case 3. The Library of Alexandria, wealth turned to dust. If the depths of the Atlantic hold the icy silence of lost materialism, the Mediterranean coast hides an even more devastating tragedy. For here, fire didn't just consume objects, but the very memory of the human species. We emerge from the crushing pressure of the water into the dry, merciless heat of Alexandria, Egypt. It is here that the definition of fortune undergoes a radical transformation. Until now, we have spoken of gold, silver, and precious stones riches that, though lost, are replaceable. Gold can be mined again. Diamonds can be cut again. But there is a kind of wealth that, once turned to dust, vanishes forever, with no possibility of rescue or reconstruction. The Great Library of Alexandria was not merely a depository of books. It was the brain of the ancient world, a monument to the audacious mindset of rulers who understood that true power resided not in the sword, but in information. For centuries, the Ptolemaic dynasty engaged in an obsessive journey to compile all existing knowledge on Earth in a single place. The ambition was so boundless that a law existed in the ports of Alexandria. Any ship that docked was required to surrender its books and scrolls. These were hastily copied by the library scribes. The copy was returned to the owner, and the original stayed. This intellectual piracy accumulated an inestimable fortune. We are talking about 500,000 to 1,000,000 papyrus rolls. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, engineering, poetry, and history. The vaults of this institution held the secrets of entire civilizations, maps of unknown worlds, and inventions that seemed like magic. However, this concentration of wisdom had a fatal weakness: its materiality. Papyrus is organic, fragile, dry. It is, essentially, fuel waiting for a spark. And history, with its cruel irony, brought that spark not through a natural accident, but at the hands of Julius Caesar in 48 BC, and subsequently through other religious and political conflicts. When the fire began, whether accidentally spreading from ships in the harbor or purposefully during later revolts, the impact was catastrophic. What happened in those hours of destruction wasn't just the burning of paper, it was the vaporization of progress. Imagine the cedar shelves, filled with scrolls containing the lifework of antiquities, geniuses, being licked by flames. Unlike the temple gold, which melted and fused to the stones, or the Titanic's jewels resting in the sludge, the knowledge of Alexandria turned to smoke. The physics of combustion here is painful. Fire breaks the chemical bonds of cellulose, transforming words, diagrams, and equations into carbon dioxide and light ash. Black and gray flakes rose into the Egyptian skies, carried by the hot wind. In those flakes were the lost plays of Sophocles, the complete history of Babylon written by Berossus, and perhaps the hidden truth about technologies that took us millennia to rediscover. There are frightening revelations about exactly what turned to dust there. We know that Hero of Alexandria had sketches and prototypes of a rudimentary steam engine. If this knowledge had survived and been disseminated, the Industrial Revolution could have started 2,000 years earlier. Imagine the decisions humanity would have made, the technological journey we would have traveled if electricity, steam, or advanced medicine hadn't been rebooted from zero. Aristarchus of Samos was already proposing that the Earth revolved around the Sun long before Copernicus. This truth was burned, forcing humanity to live in the darkness of geocentrism for additional centuries. The burning of the library was not just a fire, it was a collective lobotomy of civilization. The smoke that rose from Alexandria represented an incalculable delay. When the fire ceased, there was no rubble to mine. You cannot sift through ashes in search of a mathematical theorem. You cannot dive into the sea to recover a lost poem. The loss was total. The value of that fortune was infinite, and the result was zero. What remained was the silence of ignorance. That black dust covering the marble floor of the library contained the cure for diseases, the location of forgotten cities, and the wisdom of 1,000 generations. It was swept away, trampled, and scattered. The wind literally took the knowledge. This tragedy forces us to confront the fragility of our own legacy. Today, we store our Library of Alexandria in digital servers in the cloud. But the cloud is also physical. It also depends on energy and maintenance. The mindset that knowledge is eternal is an illusion that Alexandria unmasked in the most brutal way possible. A civilization can reach the pinnacle of sophistication, accumulate the greatest intellectual wealth of the known universe, and yet see it all disappear in a single night of chaos. The transformation of wisdom into ash is irreversible. The mourning for Alexandria is different from the mourning for the Titanic. With the Titanic, we mourn lives and luxury. With Alexandria, we mourn what we, as a species, could have been. We mourn the future that was cancelled because the past was burned. It is a phantom pain. The pain of losing something we didn't even know we had. The ashes of that library are, perhaps, the most expensive substance that ever existed on the face of the earth. More valuable than the melted gold of Jerusalem, for gold only buys things. Knowledge creates realities. As we look back at this bonfire of vanities and war, we realize that true wealth does not occupy space in vaults, but is the first to be destroyed when barbarism knocks at the door. The empire of knowledge is vast, but its walls are made of paper. And paper burns. The lesson that remains impregnated in the imaginary scent of burnt papyrus that crosses the centuries is that protecting information is more vital than protecting gold, because gold can be recovered from the rubble, but an idea, once transformed into smoke, never returns. To honor this lost memory, and to acknowledge the weight of the knowledge erased from our history, I ask you to leave a single word in the comments that symbolizes what remained of the ancient world as greatest collection of wisdom. Write only silence. Let this word echo as a tribute to what we will never be able to read. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, and leave the heat of the desert and antiquity to enter the biting cold of the 20th century. Let us travel to Russia, where one of the richest dynasties in history did not lose its fortune to the sea or accidental fire, but saw its treasures dismantled, piece by piece, with surgical and ideological precision. There, Wealth didn't just turn to dust, it was disfigured until it became unrecognizable. Case 4. The Romanov Empire? The fortune that melted? We leave behind the intellectual heat of Egypt and a silent tragedy of lost knowledge to now face a biting cold, not merely meteorological, but human. We travel to the geographic heart of Russia, where the destruction of wealth took on a much more cynical, industrial, and calculated form. If in Jerusalem gold melted by the fire of war, and on the Titanic it was lost by accident, in the Romanov Empire, fortune was systematically assassinated. We are talking about the dynasty that ruled 1/6 of the Earth's surface for over 3 centuries. The accumulation of wealth by the Tsars had no parallel in modern history. The Winter Palace and imperial residencies were showcases of an opulence bordering on the absurd, entire rooms lined with amber, chests filled with Fabergé eggs which were miracles of engineering, and jewelry, crowns studded with diamonds the size of walnuts. For the Romanovs, beauty was a manifestation of the divine right to rule. But in 1917, the world's mindset shifted abruptly. The Bolshevik Revolution didn't just bring new politics, it brought a new view on matter to the new Soviet regime. That beauty wasn't sacred, it was offensive. And more than that, it was capital. The decisions made in the dark basements of Moscow and St. Petersburg in the following years reveal a terrifying hidden truth about how ideology can transmute art into scrap. Unlike the barbarians who sacked Rome, the Bolsheviks were bureaucrats. They created the Gokran, the state depository of valuables, and initiated a process of liquidation in the most literal sense of the word. Imagine the scene behind the scenes of these confiscated deposits. Jewelers who once served the court were forced at gunpoint to appraise and dismantle the pieces they or their masters had created. The transformation was brutal. Platinum tiaras designed to adorn the heads of empresses at gala balls were placed on rough workbenches and attacked with pliers. The goal wasn't to preserve the piece, but to extract the stones. Diamonds were ripped from their delicate settings as if they were teeth being extracted from a mouth. The art, the design, the history embedded in those curves of metal, all of it was discarded as irrelevant. What mattered was the weight in carats and the metal's price on the international market. Gold and silver, stripped of their stones, were thrown into industrial crucibles. The visual impact of this image is devastating. 17th century liturgical chalices, sacred icon frames, silverware with imperial crests, and personal jewelry of the royal family, all mixed into a boiling, anonymous soup. That liquid metal, which was once shaped by the hands of genius artists, became standardized bars, cold and soulless, ready to be sold abroad to buy tractors, grain, and armaments. The soul of Imperial Russia wasn't just stolen, it was melted down and reformatted. A crown ceases to be a crown when it becomes an ingot. It loses its identity, its history, and its symbolic power. It becomes just a commodity. There are accounts that, in their haste to raise funds, the Soviet government sold treasures by the kilo, without even cataloging what was being shipped out. Revelations from archives opened decades later show that priceless artworks were exchanged for sacks of flour or second-hand industrial machinery. The journey of these riches is fragmented and tragic. Many of the famous Fabergé eggs, intimate Easter gifts, exchanged between the Tsar and Tsarina vanished completely. Some surfaced decades later in antique fairs in the American Midwest, bought by people who had no idea what they held in their hands, but others ... Others simply disappeared, believed to have been dismantled, their internal mechanical surprises crushed to recover the gold, and their enameled shells discarded or destroyed. This systematic destruction forces us to confront the fragility of aesthetic value in the face of necessity or pragmatic brutality. The revolutionary mindset saw the blood of the people in those jewels, and the way to purify this wealth was by destroying its aristocratic form and reducing it to its atomic value. It was a chemical and physical revenge. The Romanov Empire didn't just fall when Nicholas II abdicated. It finished falling when the last of its tiaras was melted in a dirty furnace, turning centuries of tradition into toxic smoke and raw metal. What remains of this colossal fortune? Very little, compared to what existed. What we see today in museums, like the Kremlin Armory, is a tiny fraction that was spared, often by mere chance or the desperate intervention of some brave curator who hid pieces in pockets or false walls. The vast majority of that glittering wealth, which defined the splendor of Eastern Europe, evaporated into the global black market or was melted down, circulating today, perhaps, in the form of common wedding bands or electronic components, without their current owners imagining that that gold once rested on the forehead of a Tsar. The lesson here is about the transience of material power. The Romanovs believed their diamonds were eternal, guarantees of a legacy that would last forever. But it only took a shift in the winds of history, a regime change, and a few bureaucratic decisions to undo it all. Physical wealth is a hostage of social context. When the context changes, yesterday's treasure becomes today's ruble. The fortune of the Tsars teaches us that no vault is safe enough when the enemy is the state ideology itself. They didn't steal the gold to get rich personally. They destroyed the art to finance a new reality, proving that beauty is the first victim of revolutions. We are facing a scenario where opulence was punished with the shine of St. Petersburg's ballrooms was extinguished, not by darkness, but by forced transformation. And as we look at these stories of the melted temple, the dissolved ship, the burnt library, and the dismantled empire, we begin to perceive a disturbing pattern. Matter is unstable. History is a constant shredder. And we, in our arrogance, continue to accumulate, to build, and to guard, ignoring the fact that the dust is always waiting, patient, ready to reclaim what is its own. To close this chapter on the dissolution of an empire and the loss of identity through the destruction of art, I ask you to leave a word in the comments that captures this feeling of something grand reduced to nothing by the human hand. Write only, melted. Let this word serve as a memorial to the beauty that was sacrificed in the name of survival and ideology. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, moving from specific historical examples to a final reflection that connects all these losses to our own existence. At the end of this journey, an uncomfortable truth remains. These fortunes were not merely lost, they were reclaimed by nature and oblivion. Fire, the sea, and revolution achieved what thieves never could. They erased the very existence of the treasure. This serves as a reminder that possession is a temporary illusion. Money can vanish, gold can turn to dust, and even the greatest riches are fragile in the face of entropy. If diving into these deep mysteries resonated with you, subscribing to the channel is the best way to ensure that we continue, together, to unearth what time has tried to hide. Hit the like button if this narrative spoke to you on the other side. That is the signal that guides our next investigations. And so I can know who the true explorers are, those who walk through the ashes until the very last second. Right? Just one word in the comments: ephemeral. The story doesn't end here, and there are other secrets the world would rather forget. Click on it and continue the journey with me over there.